Don't hate me. We all got our opinions, you know? Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be going over all the books I read in January. Unfortunately, I haven't posted since my last video, which I was meaning to, but I'm having a hard time coming up with ideas. So if you could let me know in the comments video ideas you want to see from me, that would be great. Today we're just going to be talking about all the books I read in January and the ratings I gave them. So I read a total of 7 books this month. The first book I read in January was a reread. I wanted to pick a book that I knew I would really enjoy rereading just to start the year off good. I'm sure some of you can guess it, but Happy Place is the first book I read this year. Reread for me, and I gave it 5 stars when I first read it last year, and I gave it 5 stars again. What can I say? I really loved rereading this because I annotated it the first time I read it, but I had even more annotations I made this second time around, and I don't know why, but I'm just so attached to the characters in this book, especially Win and Harriet. I feel like there's a lot of ways I relate to them both, and I just really enjoy them as individuals and as a couple. And then I also just love the friend group in this book and how realistic it is, and how when you get older you kind of drift apart from each other because everyone's lives are going different ways. Started off the year so good, 5 stars, and I'm gonna just include some tropes and themes for this book because I don't want to get too much into what it's about. But if you haven't read this book is Second Chance. There's kind of a miscommunication trope, but it didn't bother me, to be honest. Friendships, it's about grief, it's about discovering who you are and what you want to do with your life. Even if you kind of think you already had it all planned out, you can still change your mind, basically. Just reassurance in that way. And then kind of found family because it's a friend group. Forced proximity because Win and Harriet basically were engaged and they called off their engagement, but they haven't told their friend group at all, and they all meet at this summer house that they've been meeting at every summer for a couple years. And Harriet, she thinks that Win's not going to be there, but her friends surprise her with Win being there, and they have to pretend that they're still in a relationship and that they're still engaged. Love this book. Can't say any bad things about it. So next book I read in February is Under Lock by Mariana Zapata. If you know me, you know that I love all of the Mariana Zapata books I've read, and she's just like the blueprint for Slow Burn and Grumpy Sunshine. So I got this book as a gift. I think it was for Christmas. This is one of her books that I haven't read before that I was excited to pick up. Honestly, I didn't really know too much of what I was getting into. I just have like a list of her books that I don't have yet that I've been meaning to buy. But so this book was actually written in 2014. It was one of her first books she ever released. She self-published it, and 2014 is a long time ago, and I'm so like sad to say this because I've actually loved every book I've ever read by her besides this one. I actually really hated this, which is so sad to say, but it was giving kind of Wattpad, and not in a good way. The male character, I absolutely despised him. He was just like, he's a grown man. There was an age gap. I believe he's in his 30s and she's like in her early 20s. He's like 32 and she's like 23 maybe. Anyways, you think like at the ripe age of 32 he would be mature and know how to communicate, and yeah, basically he doesn't know how to communicate at all. He was very cringy. He kept, I'm not even kidding you, literally every time he spoke a sentence to her, he said the word babe at the beginning or at the end of it. Can you please shut the fuck up? It actually made me so angry. He said it every time he spoke to her, every sentence. And I'm telling you, I really wanted to DNF this book, but since I love Mariana Zapata and her other books, I really wanted to see this one through, and I ended up seeing it through and I did not like it at all. I gave it 1.5 stars, and that is really low for me. Like, I really didn't like it if I gave it under 2 stars. Basically what this book is about is a girl named Iris, and she moves to Austin following like her 6 months of being unemployed. She moves back in with, I believe, her brother, I think, and she's looking for a job, and her brother knows this guy that owns a tattoo shop, and his name is Dex, and she gets a job at his tattoo shop. Their relationship forms. Honestly, I feel like there was no plot in this book. Like, to me, it didn't really make a lot of sense, and it was really long for what it was, and I put that I thought the male character was controlling and immature and didn't know how to communicate. He said the word babe way too many times, extremely overused. Some of the themes and tropes in this book are grumpy sunshine, workplace romance. It's kind of a slow burn, but I feel like it's nowhere near compared to her other slow burns. Like, her other books are very much slow burn, but this one kind of was just like a little bit of a slow burn. And then forced proximity because they work together. I guess the moral of this story is that I didn't enjoy this book, even though I really enjoy Mariana Zapata's writing and all of the other books I read by her. But since this was published in 2014 and the other books I've read by her are like 2019 and higher, like, I really can tell how she's developed as an author and how her writing has developed, which I think is interesting to see. Yeah, this wasn't for me. I think I'm just too grown to be like reading something like this, maybe. I don't know. Maybe, like, I'm sure if I read this when I was literally like 13, I would have like liked it, but that's okay. I still love Mariana Zapata. I'm still gonna read her other books. Maybe I'll steer away from the ones that are like from a while ago. Sad about that, but what you gonna do? The third book I read in January is Elvis and Me by Priscilla Presley with Sandra Harmon. I believe Sandra Harmon wrote it for Priscilla. So the main reason I picked this up is because when I was little, I grew up listening to a lot of Elvis because my dad is a huge Elvis fan. I know a lot about Elvis, I feel, and I really wanted to get my hands on this because it is from Priscilla's perspective and her relationship with Elvis. Priscilla, the movie, is based on this book, so I really wanted to read this before I watched Priscilla, just to see how well they adapted the book into the movie. And I actually read this so quick, within 24 hours, I think. Obviously, if Elvis doesn't really intrigue you, maybe you don't really care about this, but basically I thought this book was really interesting and extremely eye-opening. I don't feel comfortable rating this because it is a true story and it's about her life and her relationship with Elvis and what she went through, so I don't feel comfortable rating it. This follows Priscilla right before she meets Elvis. You get some information on how her life is and where she lives and kind of what she's going through at the time right before she meets Elvis. She was living in Texas, but her father was a sergeant for the army or the military, so they basically moved around a lot because of his job moving around, and she had to move to Germany when she was in the middle of high school because her dad had to move because of that job. And basically that's how she meets Elvis, because Elvis was in Germany in the military at that time. And the way they met was so interesting. Basically, I feel like telling this is not really a spoiler, but she met Elvis through someone at her school. She was sitting at lunch. This boy approached her and was like, "Hi, do you like Elvis?" And she's like, "Sure, who doesn't like Elvis?" And he was like, "Well, me and my wife go to his house sometimes on the weekends. We're kind of friends with him. Would you like to meet him?" And that's how she meets Elvis. That's how she gets invited to his house. So, but yeah, this is about from literally their first encounter and then everything that happens after that. And yeah, I thought it was super interesting. I really like reading books like this. I guess this is a biography, so yeah. I really enjoy reading memoirs and biographies, even though I haven't read a lot. All the ones I've read, I've really enjoyed. So you really got to see Elvis through Priscilla's eyes in this book. It honestly made me change my opinion on him and everything that went down. That is what I thought about this book, and I do recommend it. Like I said, I'm not going to rate it because it feels weird to rate it. I haven't seen Priscilla yet, but that's that. Honestly, you guys, this month was pretty a mid reading month, which I wasn't super happy about because it is the first month of the year. Alas, So the next book I read is Loath to Love You by Ali Hazelwood. So this is actually a novella collection of 3 different romance stories, but every girl within each romance story is friends with one another, which I thought was really interesting and fun. I honestly didn't expect this to be super steamy, but it literally said it on the back. So it follows a group of friends, but each romance story follows one girl. So I really like The Love Hypothesis and Love in the Brain by Ali Hazelwood, so I was excited to pick this up. And also it's kind of like nothing I've ever read before because it's 3 short romances within one book, so that intrigued me. And yeah, I thought it was pretty decent. Wasn't expecting it to be so steamy, and I wasn't like really in love with that aspect of it. And since each romance story was short, you didn't really get a lot of character development and like relationship development, which is fine, which is expected. But for me, I think that's kind of something I didn't love because like I like to get attached to characters and I like slow burn. This wasn't that because she could only fit so much into each little romance. I put the stories were short and sweet, but at the same time it was hard for me to invest in each relationship. But I do think I would recommend this book. Each little story was really fast paced and it was easy to get through and they were fun. I feel like this is a good palate cleanser if you're looking for one. I gave this 3 stars, so it was decent, it was good. I recommend it, but it's definitely not something I'm gonna like remember and like want to reread, basically. Next book I read is Dear Dolly by Dolly Alderton. This is a self-help book. I've read about 3 books by her, I think. This is the only book I've never read by her that I've been wanting to get my hands on. This is a self-help book, but basically Dolly has this column in I don't know if it's on her website or what, but basically people can send in questions for her and basically ask for advice based on certain situations they're going through, and Dolly will pick through all the submissions she gets and she'll reply to some of these people.
I'm Miss Nancy, okay? I am Miss Nancy.
She basically picked a couple ones and put them into this book. So basically she has a handful of questions revolving dating that she got, friendships, relationships, family, sex, breakups, and exes, and then body and soul. So that's how it's sectioned in the book. So there's like a couple questions around each of those subjects, which I liked the way it was formatted, and I feel like it was interesting to read the advice she gave based on those subjects and the questions and stories people were submitting to her. Some of those subjects I feel like I wasn't able to relate to, so I thought overall the book was decent, but there is some advice that I'll take away from this book, but about like 70% of it I feel like I couldn't relate to. And I was just like reading and not really like taking in a lot of it, if that makes sense. Basically, I do recommend this, and I do think Dolly gives a lot of good advice. 3 stars, I recommend. I do enjoy Dolly Alderton's mind. She's witty, she's comforting, she's funny, she's caring, and I feel like you really get that out of all the books I've read by her, and especially this one because she's giving advice. Second to last book I read in January is Powerless by Elsie Silver. This is the 3rd book in the Chestnut Springs series, and I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I don't think I'm gonna continue this series after this book. I believe there's only one more out after this, and I heard a lot of people don't like it. It's their least favorite, and from the reviews I've seen, a lot of people have said this one is their favorite, so I had very high expectations for this. I liked about like the first 20% of the book, but then after that I really just didn't care, and I wasn't attached. I really just didn't care how the relationship was going to pan out, and I don't know, it kind of fell flat for me. Dare I say, I do think this series is a little overrated. They're romance books, they're decent romance books, but they're nothing groundbreaking and crazy. I don't know. So I felt like once I got like 200 pages into the book, I wasn't invested in the relationship, anymore, and the build-up was good, but once they were together I was just like, I don't really care. So some of the themes and tropes in this were sports romance, because the main guy, Jasper, is a hockey player, and then the girl in the book, her name is Sloane. Sloane is a ballerina, and basically they're childhood friends because Jasper has a pretty bad past with his family and he needed a place to live, and basically Sloane's cousins took him in. So he's kind of been around for a really long time, since they were like in their preteens. So there is a little bit of an age gap, and they basically both have had crushes on each other their whole lives, but neither of them ever acted on it. Fast forward to present time, Sloane is getting married to an absolute douchebag of a guy, which doesn't end up happening. And then finally, Sloane and Jasper connect on a romantic level. Yeah, so there's a sports romance, friends to lovers, still small town. This series is very much known for it being in a small town. And then found family, because you do get, like the 2 books before this, the couples that were in those 2 books are in this book as well. Like you get little snippets of them, and which I did like. I like the found family aspect, but yeah, I just wasn't super attached to this relationship. And like I said, I don't think I'm going to continue the series based on what people have said about the next book, but it's just all right for me. Like this series is just, it's decent. It's nothing crazy in my opinion. Don't hate me. We all got our opinions, you know? I gave this book 3 stars. So yeah, I gave a lot of books this month 3 stars. I thought they were just fine and good, but nothing groundbreaking. The final book I read in January, highly anticipated book for me, highly anticipated series. I've been recommended this series by different people, and as you know, I've read a couple fantasies. Towards the middle and end of 2023, I read a couple fantasies that had like pretty big subplots of romance. I honestly don't think I'm a fantasy girly. I don't think I could read a fantasy book that doesn't have romance in it. I just don't think that's for me. I was recommended this series. I finally started it because a lot of people said that if you've read fantasy that has romance in it and you've enjoyed it, that you should read this series. So I started it. Yep. A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I know like so many people have read this already, but there also, I feel like, are a lot of people that know about it and have never picked it up because it is very daunting. Especially her other series that she's really popular for is like 9 books long. This series, I believe, is only 5 or 6 books long. But yeah, I started it and I honestly don't know how I feel. I just finished this book yesterday and I'm still kind of sitting on it. I feel like when I first started it, it was really hard for me to get into it, and I feel like there was so much information being thrown at me. I was kind of overwhelmed. I was expecting that though, because I know that a lot of fantasy series, the first book, you're always getting so much information because there's a lot of world building and you're being introduced to a lot of people. So yeah, I was expecting that, so I did take it slow. Okay, also I read online that this was supposed to be a YA series, but then she didn't end up going in that direction. It's more of an adult fantasy series. Hopefully I say the names right. So this follows a 19-year-old girl named Feyre. I believe that's how you say her name. Sorry if it's not. She lives in this village and she's basically the hunter in her family. And she's out hunting one day and she kills a wolf. She thinks it's a wolf, but it's actually a fairy, which is basically an immortal beast. And Feyre is mortal, and so is her family. Basically, there's mortal versus immortal. Honestly, I don't know if I can say why. I don't really understand it. Basically, Feyre is hunting one day and she kills what she thinks is a wolf, but it's actually a fairy. So a couple higher ups in the fairy world come to her doorstep and basically take her away for what she did. She has no choice but to go with them, and she's taken to this magical world, and she has a captor, and the captor's name is Tamlin, and he is a higher up in the fairy world. And she's very confused as to why he took her in, because he's actually being super nice to her, and you're just not really understanding. You're really confused. You're confused as she is, because you're like, what's the point of this? Why did he take her in, and why is he kind of being nice to her and letting her live in his house with her since she killed one of his allies? So yeah, I felt like a good part of this book was kind of slow paced for me. I was just like, I don't really know where this is gonna go, and I don't know how interested I am in it. Tamlin and Feyre form a relation, a friendship, obviously blossoms into a romance. The last fourth of the book was really high stakes, and I started getting invested, and I felt like it was entertaining. But yeah, it was hard for me to get into this, and I don't know if it's for me, but a lot of people say the second book is their favorite, so I'm gonna continue because I didn't hate it. I thought it was pretty good, but it's nothing like groundbreaking. I expected it to like blow my mind because a lot of people talk so highly of this series, but again, this is only the first book, so maybe I'm gonna read the second book and my life's gonna be changed, who knows. So yes, I'm gonna be continuing this, and I'm glad I bit the bullet because I was pretty nervous to start it because it is my like first ever fantasy series I've ever started that's like a longer series. It's like 6 books, 5 books, a lot of commitment, honestly. So yeah, I gave this 3.5 stars. And some of the themes and tropes are high stakes, higher powers, / rulers. I wrote forbidden love because she's immortal and he's immortal, and then mortals versus immortals because basically all the immortal fairies don't like humans, and she's staying at Tamlin's, and if she goes out and about and doesn't stay with him, she basically is gonna die because there's a lot of creatures and shit that don't like humans, and she won't be able to survive. So basically she has no choice but to stay with him. And then all this crazy shit happens. I can't really get into it because I'm not spoiling. I'm sure a lot of you have read this series, and if you have, let me know like when you started getting really invested. Was it after you read the first book? Because honestly, I feel like the way this book ended, it could have just ended. Like, I feel like it ended pretty, like, well, and, like, it made sense. Like, it was a good conclusion, and I'm really confused as to how there's gonna be 4 more books after this. I really don't know what it's gonna be about. I feel like fantasy, like, big brain is for fantasy, and I don't know if I have that. Yeah, let me know if you read this series. If you're starting it, maybe we can read at the same time. Hit me up, message me, we can talk about it. We can be confused together, or you can help me not be confused. Anyways, I recommend it as of right now. We'll see how I feel after I read the second book, which I will be reading this month in February. This is kind of a longer video, I feel, because I did read 7 books and I was rambling probably, surely. Those are all the books I read in January. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in my next video. I don't know what that will be. Maybe it'll be before my February wrap up. Hopefully it will be. But anyways, thank you for watching. If you watched all the way through, you're an angel. Let me know what your favorite book was that you read in January. Okay, I'll see you in my next video.